Hi, welcome to this Corbettmaths video. In this video, we're going to look at the video solutions to the Corbettmaths practice questions on solving quadratics by using factorization. In this video, we're going to focus on the questions that appear in the GCSE Foundation exam. So that's quadratic equations in the form of x squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So whenever the x squared term is just a 1x squared. If you need any extra help on solving quadratics by using factorization, if you go to Corbettmaths and go to video numbers 266 and 267e, there's dedicated video tutorials there that will help you on this topic. Alternatively, you can scan this QR code. But in this video, we're going to focus on the video solutions to the practice questions, so let's get started. Okay, question number one. Question number one, we've been asked to solve x minus 2 multiplied by x plus 9 equals 0. Now what's great here is this quadratic equation has been factorized for us, so it's already in brackets. So what we need to do is we need to consider if we've got two brackets that times together to be equal to 0, that means that either bracket must be equal to 0. So in terms of this bracket, to make this bracket 0, x would have to equal 2, so x would be equal to 2 because 2 take away 2 is equal to 0. Or to make this bracket 0, x would have to be equal to negative 9 because negative 9 plus 9 is equal to 0. So that means that we've got two possible solutions, that either x equals 2 or x equals negative 9. Because if x is equal to 2, you've got 2 take away 2, which is equal to 0, and then that means that this bracket is 0. This bracket would be 11 because 2 plus 9 is equal to 11, but 0 times 11 is equal to 0. So that means that one solution would be x is equal to 2, or another possible solution would be negative 9. Because if x is equal to negative 9, this bracket would be negative 9 plus 9, which is equal to 0. So that bracket is equal to 0. This bracket would be equal to negative 11 because negative 9 take away 2 would be negative 11. And negative 11 times 0 is equal to 0. So that means that we've got two possible solutions, that either x is equal to 2 or x is equal to negative 9. And that's it. Now some teachers might recommend that you write down x equals 2 and x equals negative 9. I tend to write x equals 2 or x equals negative 9. It doesn't really matter which way around you write it. I would just recommend writing it the way that your teacher recommends you write it down. So I've written down that x equals 2 or x equals negative 9, and that's our two solutions. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 2. So question number 2 says, circle the two roots of x minus 6 multiplied by x plus 1 equals 0. So we've got our two brackets that times together to be equal to 0. So that means that either bracket would have to be equal to 0. Now we've been asked to circle the two roots. This word roots just means answers or solutions. It's just a fancy word for answers or solutions. So it just means what's the answers to this equation. So we circle the two roots or the two answers or solutions to this equation. Okay, so we want to make each bracket equal to 0. So in terms of this bracket, to make this bracket equal to 0, one solution would be x equals 6 because 6 take away 6 is equal to 0. So that would be one solution, x is equal to 6. Or if we make this bracket equal to 0, x would be equal to negative 1 because negative 1 plus 1 is equal to 0. So that's our other possible solution. So we've been asked to circle the two roots of x minus 6 times x plus 1 is equal to 0. So our two possible solutions would be either x equals 6 because 6 take away 6 is 0, or x equals negative 1 because negative 1 plus 1 is equal to 0. And that's it. And just to show you why the other two solutions wouldn't work, if x was equal to negative 6, this bracket you'd have negative 6 take away 6, that's equal to negative 12. And then in terms of this bracket, you'd have negative 6 plus 1, that's negative 5. And then negative 12 times negative 5 would be equal to 60, so that's not equal to 0. And likewise, if x was equal to 1, you'd have 1 take away 6, that's equal to minus 5. And then you'd have 1 plus 1, that's equal to 2. And 5 times 2 is equal to minus 10, not 0. So our two solutions would be negative 1 and 6. And again, we can check those answers. If x is equal to negative 1, you'd have negative 1 take away 6, which is negative 7, multiplied by 0 because negative 1 plus 1 is equal to 0. So negative 7 times 0 is 0. So that's one possible solution. Or the other possible solution is x is equal to 6 because 6 take away 6 would be equal to 0. This bracket would be 6 plus 1 is equal to 7, and 0 times 7 is equal to 0. So there are two possible solutions, or our two roots. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 3. So question number 3, we've been asked to solve x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0. So this time we've got a quadratic equation. It equals 0, so that's fantastic that all the terms are over to one side and we've got 0 on the other side. Now to solve this, what we're going to do is we're going to factorize it. So we're going to factorize the quadratic on the left-hand side. Now before you do the rest of these questions, make sure you're confident with factorizing quadratics. Now for the GCSE Foundation exam, whenever you're solving equations like this, the quadratic that you're going to factorize will be in the form of x squared plus something or x squared minus something. It'll just be an x squared term at the front, which is quite nice. Okay, so if we wanted to factorize this, what we're going to do is we're going to put down two brackets. So we're going to do bracket, 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 and that's equal to 0. So we're just factorizing this left-hand side here. Now we want to have at the front of both brackets, we're going to put an x because x times x is x squared. So that's fantastic. Now to find the numbers that go in the brackets here and here, we're going to consider two numbers that will multiply together to give you the number on the end. So we want to find two numbers that will times together to be equal to 6. And then whenever we add these two numbers together in the brackets, they're going to add together to be 5. So in terms of two numbers that will times together to be 6 and add together to be 5, that's going to be 2 and 3. So I'm going to write plus 2 and plus 3 inside of the brackets. So we've factorized that quadratic and we've got x plus 2 times x plus 3. So we've factorized that quadratic. Now I just want to mention you could write x plus 3 and x plus 2 and that'd be totally fine. But just be careful that if it was perhaps 2 and minus 3 that you kept the minus sign with the 3. Okay, so we've factorized that quadratic. Now we want to find when each of these brackets are equal to 0 because we've got something times something is equal to 0. That means that one of the brackets will be equal to 0. So let's find our two possible solutions. So in terms of this bracket here, to make this bracket equal to 0, x would be equal to negative 2 because negative 2 plus 2 is equal to 0. So that's one possible solution. X is equal to negative 2, x is equal to negative 2. Or our other solution, or x would be equal to, well, to make this bracket equal to 0, x would be equal to negative 3 because negative 3 plus 3 is equal to 0. So that's our two solutions, that either x is equal to negative 2 or x is equal to negative 3. And there are our two possible solutions. And we can check them. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0, and then 0 times something is equal to 0. And if x was equal to negative 3, you would have negative 3 plus 3, that's equal to 0, and 0 times something is equal to 0. So there are two possible solutions, and that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 4. So question number 4, we've been asked to solve x squared plus 9x plus 14 is equal to 0. So let's factorize this quadratic on the left-hand side. So we're going to do our bracket, 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 and that's equal to 0. Now again, it's just an x squared term, so that's quite nice. Remember in the GCSE foundation exam, it'll just be that letter squared. There won't be any numbers in front of it, such as 4 or 5 or anything like that. So we're going to put x's in the front of both brackets, so an x there and an x there, because x times x is x squared. Then in terms of finding the numbers to go inside the brackets, we want to find two numbers that will times together to give us an answer of 14, and they will add together to be 9. And I'm thinking 2 and 7, because 2 times 7 is equal to 14, and 2 plus 7 is equal to 9. So that's what we'll go in the brackets, 2 and 7. So we'll factorize that quadratic. And we can check this is right. If we expand our brackets, x times x is x squared, x times 7 will be plus 7x, 2 times x will be plus 2x, and 2 times 7 will be plus 14, and then 7x plus 2x is equal to that 9x in the middle there. So that's fantastic. We've factorized that left-hand side there. So that just shows that we've got it right. Now you shouldn't need to do that if you know how to factorize, and then you can just put it in the brackets. Okay, so we've factorized the quadratic. Now what we want to do is we want to find out when each bracket will be equal to 0. So in terms of this bracket, well, if x is equal to negative 2, negative 2 plus 2 is equal to 0. And in terms of this bracket, x plus 7, whenever x is equal to negative 7, that bracket would be equal to 0. So our two solutions would be either x equals negative 2 or x equals negative 7. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 5. So question number 5, we've been asked to solve x squared plus 21x plus 20 equals 0. So to solve this quadratic equation, we're going to want to factorize the quadratic on the left-hand side, get our two brackets, and then find when those brackets will be equal to 0. And then there'll be our two solutions, because obviously if two things times together to be 0, one or both of them are equal to 0. Okay, so let's start up by factorizing this quadratic. So we're going to put our brackets down, bracket, 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 and then equals 0. Because this is x squared, we're going to put x's at the front of both brackets like so, because x times x is x squared. Now we're going to look for two numbers that multiply together to give us 20, and we'll add together to be 21. So they're going to be 20 and 1. So we're going to write plus 20 and plus 1. And again, if you expand our brackets here, x times x is x squared. X times 1 would be 1x, and 20 times x would be 20x, and if you add them together that'd be 21x, and then 20 times 1 would be 20, so they would expand to give that quadratic, so we know we factorized it correctly. Okay, now let's find when each bracket would be equal to 0. So in terms of x plus 20, the value of x that would make that equal to 0 would be negative 20. If x is equal to negative 20 plus 20 is equal to 0. Okay, or our other solution would be, if we look at our next bracket, x would be equal to, now to make this bracket equal to 0, x would have to be equal to negative 1, because negative 1 plus 1 would be equal to 0, so x equal to negative 1. So there are two solutions, that either x equals negative 20 or x equals negative 1. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 6. Okay, question number 6. We've been asked to solve x squared minus 3x minus 18 equals 0. Now this one's a bit different than the one before because this time we've got some minus signs involved, but that's okay, it's the same technique. We just need to find two numbers that will times together to give us negative 18 and we'll add together to give us negative 3. Okay, so let's have a look at this quadratic equation. So what's great is we've got 0 on one side and the quadratic on the other. So let's factorize the quadratic. So bracket, 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 bracket equals 0. Okay, now we want to find what goes in the brackets. So let's start off with the x squared. So it's going to be x and x because x times x is x squared. Now we want to find two numbers that will multiply together to give us negative 18 and they will add together to give us negative 3. So in terms of two numbers that will times together to be negative 18, now what you can do is if you want to, you can list your options here and then choose the right one in terms of the numbers, the pair of numbers that will add together to be negative 3. Now I can spot it straight away. The more and more questions you do like this, you'll be able to just spot it's going to be negative 6 and 3 because negative 6 times 3 is negative 18 and negative 6 plus 3 will be negative 3. So you get to become really good at these, being able to spot and find the answer straight away. But I'm just going to show you that if you weren't sure how to find them. So we want to find two numbers that will times together to be negative 18. Now because they're times together to be a negative, one's going to be negative and one's going to be positive. So I'm going to go for negative 18 and 1. Negative 18 times 1 is negative 18. But negative 18 plus 1 would be negative 17, not negative 3. So that wouldn't work. Okay, next, if we then tried negative 1 and 18, just switching those around, negative 1 times 18 would be negative 18, but negative 1 plus 18 would be 17, not negative 3. Okay, so we want to find another option. So I'm now going to go for negative 9 and 2. Negative 9 times 2 is negative 18. And negative 9 plus 2 would be negative 7, so not negative 3. Okay, now if you wanted to, you could try negative 2 and 9, but I know that's not going to work because negative 2 times 9 is negative 18, but negative 2 plus 9 would be 7, not negative 3, so that's not going to work. Okay, next we could then try negative 6 and 3. Negative 6 times 3 is negative 18, and negative 6 plus 3 would be negative 3. So that's going to work, so that's going to be the right option. So in our brackets we would have x minus 6 and x plus 3. And here we can just check this. X times x is x squared, fantastic. X times 3 would be 3x. Minus 6 times x would be minus 6x, and 3x take away 6x would be minus 3x, so that would work. And negative 6 times 3 would be negative 18, so that's fantastic. Okay, now we've found what the brackets are, we now want to find when each of them will be equal to 0. So in terms of this first bracket, we've got x minus 6. Well, what number take away 6 is equal to 0? That's going to be 6. X is equal to 6. Okay, and then if we have a look at our next bracket, to make this bracket equal to 0, x would be negative 3. X would be equal to negative 3. So there are two solutions, that x equals 6 or x equals negative 3. And that's it. Now, just one thing I want to mention is some of my students, particularly at foundation level, have noticed that whenever they factorize their quadratics, and whenever you factorize quadratics at foundation level, it'll just be an x or y at the front of the brackets. They just find that the solutions are the opposite sign. So if you've got x minus 6 in the bracket, the solution would be 6. If you've got x plus 3 in the bracket, x would be negative 3. So just the opposite sign. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 7. So question number 7, we've been asked to solve x squared plus x minus 12 equals 0. So here we've got a quadratic on the left hand side and it equals 0 on the right hand side, so that's fantastic. Now what we want to do is we want to factorize this quadratic, so let's put our brackets down. Bracket, 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 bracket equals 0. We've got x squared, so that's great, so let's put an x and an x at the front of both brackets. Now we want to find two numbers that will multiply together to give us negative 12. And here, you might notice here when we look at this x, you might not see there's a number in front of it. But when we've got plus x, that's plus 1x. Remember, if you had 1x, whenever you use an algebra, you wouldn't write 1x, you typically just write x. So because it says plus x, that's going to be plus 1x. So we want to find two numbers that will add together to give us 1. Okay? So if you just say an x, it's a 1x. If you see a minus x, like in our next question, that'll be a minus 1x. Okay, so we want to find two numbers that will times together to be minus 12. So with some options would be, well, minus 12 and 1, they would times together to be minus 12. Remember, one of them is positive, one of them is negative because they're timesing together to give us a negative. Now, negative 12 plus 1 would be negative 11, not 1. And if we change those around to be negative 1 and 12, they still would times together to be negative 12, but they would add together to be 11. So neither of those options would work for this quadratic. Okay, we could then go for negative 6 and 2. If we double negative 6, that's negative 12. But if we add them together, that's going to be negative 4, not 1. And if we change them around and done negative 2 and 6, they would times together still to be negative 12, but they would add together to be 4 because negative 2 plus 6 is 4, not 1. Okay, so now let's go for negative 3 and 4. Negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. That's fantastic. And negative 3 plus 4 would be equal to 1. So that's the one that we needed there. So that's it. That's the right option. x minus 3, and then x plus 4. And that's it. Now, in terms of that factorization, I was able to look at this and find the right answer straight away. The more and more factorizing that you do, the quicker you'll become at it. So you don't need to write this list down whenever you become good at factorizing. So you just need to have a bit of patience to begin with, keep practicing factorizing quadratics, and eventually you'll become a bit like me and be able to factorize it straight away. So I can look at this one and factorize it instantly, and you'll be the same soon if you just do lots of practice. Okay, so let's then have a look at our solutions. So in terms of this first bracket, it's going to be x equals 3, because 3 take away 3 is equal to 0. Or, and in terms of this bracket, x would be negative 4. X equals negative 4, because negative 4 plus 4 is equal to 0. So there are two solutions. And that's it. So either x equals 3 or x equals negative 4. Okay, let's have a look at our next question, question number 8. Okay, question number 8, we've been asked to solve x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. So again, we've got our quadratic on one side and equals 0 on the other, so that's fantastic. Now what we're going to do is we're going to factorize that quadratic. So let's put our brackets down, and then we've got equals 0. And then at the front of both brackets, we're going to put an x, so an x and an x, because x times x is x squared. Now we want to find two numbers that will multiply together to give us negative 6, and they will add together to be the number in front of the x. So that's going to be minus 1, because it's minus x, that's the same as minus 1x. So we want to find two numbers that will times together to give us negative 6, and add together to give us negative 1. Now, I'm not going to write the list down this time, I'm just going to tell you how I would do this question. So I want to find two numbers that times together to be negative 6, so one's going to be positive and one's going to be negative. Now I'm then going to think of the option with the add together to be negative 1. So I'm thinking that's going to be negative 3 and 2, because if we had negative 3 and 2, negative 3 times 2 is negative 6, and negative 3 plus 2, if you go up 2 from negative 3, you get to negative 1. So that's it, that's our option. So rather than listing them all out, you'll soon be able to just work that out in your head. So that's the right option. So x minus 3 and x plus 2. Now we've factorized the quadratic, we just then need to find out the values of x. So here, x would be equal to 3, because 3 take away 3 is equal to 0, so that would work for that bracket. Or, and in terms of this bracket, x would be equal to negative 2. And that's it. So either x equals 3 or x equals negative 2. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 9. So question number 9, we've been asked to solve x squared minus 49 equals 0. So this one's a little bit different than the ones we've looked at so far, because this time it doesn't have an x term, we've got an x squared term, we've got the constant on the end, but we don't have that plus 5x or plus 1x or whatever in the middle. We've just got that minus 49, and then it equals 0. Now to factorize something like this, I'd highly recommend you watch video 120 in Corbettmaths, which is factorizing using difference between two squareds. If you've got something that's squared, such as x squared, and then a subtracted difference, and then another thing that's squared, so 49 is a squared number, then what you can use is you can use the difference between two squareds to factorize it. So to factorize something like this, you'd put two brackets down, and then you put equal to 0, and then what you do is you square root both of the terms. The square root of x squared is x, so put x's at the front of both brackets, and we're going to square root 49, which is 7, so 7 and 7. And we're going to do one bracket with a plus sign, and one bracket with a minus sign. And that's it. We've factorized that using the difference between two squareds. And we can check it. X times x is x squared. Fantastic. X times minus 7 would be minus 7x. And 7 times x would be 7x. And minus 7x plus 7x is equal to 0. So we've got no x's there. And then 7 times minus 7 would be minus 49. So that's it factorized. So the difference between two squareds is really useful whenever you want to factorize something like this, where you've got something squared, subtract something squared. The difference between two squares. Okay, now let's get our solutions. So in terms of this bracket, well, x would be equal to negative 7, because negative 7 plus 7 is equal to 0. Or, in terms of this bracket, you're going to get that x is equal to 7. So there are two solutions, that either x is equal to negative 7 or x is equal to 7. And again, I highly recommend you watch that video on the difference between two squareds. Okay, let's have a look at our next question, question number 10. So question number 10, we've been asked to solve x squared minus 2x minus 8 equals 0. Again, we've got a quadratic equaling 0, so that's great. So let's factorize the quadratic. So we put our brackets down, put equal to 0. Because it's x squared, we're going to put x's at the front of our brackets. And now we want to find two numbers that will times together to give us negative 8, and they will add together to be negative 2. Now again, we could list all the options down. Because they're timesing together to be a negative, one's going to be positive and one's going to be negative. They're going to times together to be negative 8, and they're going to add to be negative 2. So I'm thinking negative 4 and 2. Because negative 4 times 2 would be negative 8. And negative 4 plus 2 would go up 2, so it'd be then negative 2. So that's it. So in our brackets would be x minus 4 and x plus 2. So there are the two brackets. Now in terms of our solutions, this bracket, x would be equal to 4, because 4 take away 4 is equal to 0. Or in terms of this bracket, x would be equal to negative 2. So there are two solutions, that either x equals 4 or x equals negative 2. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 11. So question number 11, we've been asked to solve x squared plus 10x minus 24 equals 0. So if I wanted to solve something like this, I would factorize what's on the left-hand side. So bracket, 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 bracket equals 0. And then in terms of the brackets, I'm going to put x's at the front of both brackets. And we want to find two numbers that will times together to be minus 24 and they'll add together to be 10. Now again, they're timesing together to be a negative. So one's positive and one's negative, and they're adding together to be 10. So again, we could write down our options of things that times together to be negative 24. But again, I'm just spotting that it's going to be 12 and negative 2. Because 12 times negative 2 would be negative 24. And negative 2 plus 12 is equal to 10. So that's it. So it's going to be x plus 10 and x minus 2. And that means then in terms of our solutions that x would be equal to negative 12 or x would be equal to 2. And that's it. That's our two solutions. X equals negative 12 or x equals 2. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 12. So question number 12, we've been asked to solve x squared minus 13x plus 30 equals 0. So again, we've got a quadratic equaling 0. So let's factorize this. So bracket, 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 bracket equals 0. And we want to find two numbers that will times together to be 30 and will add together to be negative 13. Now this one's a bit different than the ones we've looked at so far. Actually, I need to go back to the x squared and put x's at the front of our brackets. Okay, now this one's a bit different than the ones we've looked at so far because the two numbers will times together to be 30, but they'll add together to be negative 13. So normally, whenever you were to think of two numbers that times together to be a positive, you'd choose two positive numbers, such as 2 and 15. But a positive plus a positive would be equal to a positive and not a negative. So in this case, it can't be a positive and a positive. It's going to have to be a negative and a negative. So inside the brackets, it's going to have to be two negatives, because a negative times a negative is a positive. And when you add those two negatives together, you're going to get that negative 13. So in terms of our options, we could have something like negative 2 and negative 15. But negative 2 times negative 15 is negative 30. But negative 2 plus negative 15, well, if you're at negative 2 and you go down another 15, you're going to get to negative 17, so that's not going to work. So I'm thinking something such as negative 3 and negative 10, because negative 3 times negative 10 is 30, and negative 3 plus negative 10, if you're negative 3 and you go down another 10, you're going to get to negative 13. So that's going to be our option. So x minus 3 and x minus 10. So that means our solutions will be x equals 3 or x equals 10. And that's it. There are two answers. X equals 3 or x equals 10. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 13. So question number 13, we've been asked to solve y squared plus 4y minus 12 equals 0. So this question is a bit different than the ones we've had so far, because the ones we've had so far have just had x squareds and x's. This time we've got a y squared and a y, but we're going to use the same approach. So we've got the quadratic on the left-hand side, and we've got that's equal to 0 on the right-hand side, so that's fantastic. So what we want to do is we want to factorize the quadratic on the left-hand side, as before, and then find when each bracket will be equal to 0. So let's put our brackets down. So bracket, 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 bracket equals 0. At the front of both brackets this time we're going to put a y, because it's y squared. Y times y is y squared. And we want to find two numbers that will times together to give us negative 12 and will add together to give us 4. So I'm thinking that's going to be negative 2 and 6, because negative 2 times 6 is negative 12 and negative 2 plus 6 is equal to 4. So it's going to be y minus 2 and y plus 6. Now in terms of when the brackets are going to equal 0, this bracket will be whenever y is equal to 2, because 2 take away 2 is equal to 0. Or in terms of this bracket, it'll be whenever y is equal to negative 6, because negative 6 plus 6 is equal to 0. So there are two solutions, that y is equal to 2 or y is equal to negative 6. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 14. Okay, so in terms of question number 14, we've been asked to solve m squared plus 24m plus 63 equals 0. So again, we're going to put our brackets down. So bracket, 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 bracket equals 0. And we're going to factorize the left-hand side. Because it's m squared, we're going to put m's at the front of both brackets, so m and m. And then in terms of our numbers, we want to find two numbers that will multiply together to give us 63, and will add together to give us 24. Okay, so if we choose 21 and 3, 21 times 3 is equal to 63, and 21 plus 3 is equal to 24. So that's it. It's going to be plus 21 and plus 3. Now you may have started with two other numbers. So for instance, in terms of 63, you may have chosen something like 9 times 7, because 9 times 7 is equal to 63. But 9 plus 7 is equal to 16, so it wouldn't be the 24 that we needed. And then you just need to carry on until you find 21 and 3. So that's fantastic. We now know what goes inside the brackets. That means either m is equal to negative 21 or m is equal to negative 3. And that's it. There are solutions. M equals negative 21 or m equals negative 3. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 15. So question number 15, we've been asked to solve m squared minus 16m plus 64 equals 0. Okay, so in terms of this, we're going to factorize the left-hand side. So we're going to factorize that quadratic. So bracket equals 0. We're going to put m's at the front of our bracket. So m and m, because it's m squared. M times m is m squared. Now, in terms of the numbers in the brackets, they're going to times together to be 64, and they're going to add together to be negative 16. Now, because they times together to be a positive, but add together to be a negative, they're both going to be negative numbers inside the brackets. Now, in terms of this, I've spotted the answer already. I know it's going to be negative 8 and negative 8, because negative 8 times negative 8 is equal to 64, and negative 8 plus negative 8 will be equal to minus 16. But you may have chosen perhaps negative 1 and negative 64 to begin with, and then you do negative 1 times negative 64 is equal to 64, but negative 1 plus negative 64 would be negative 65, so it wouldn't be the negative 16 we needed in the middle there. So then you'd need to try other options until you find the negative 8 and negative 8, because negative 8 times negative 8 is 64, and negative 8 plus negative 8 is equal to negative 16, and that's it. So inside the brackets we'll have m minus 8 and m minus 8, so it's the same bracket twice. So that means this time we've got what we call a repeated root, so we've got the same answer twice, so we're going to have one solution here whenever we write it down. So that means that either m equals 8, or here m would equal 8, so it'd be what we call a repeated root. So the answer would be m equals 8, and that's it, that's our answer. Okay, let's go to the next question, question number 16. So question number 16, we're told this time the two solutions to x squared plus bx plus c equals 0 are x equals negative 8 and x equals negative 2. And we've been asked to find the values of b and c. So this time we've been given the answers, and we need to go back and find out what the question was. So if we go back up to the last one, we were given that quadratic and we had to then solve it to find out what m was. This time we're told what the answers are. We need to go back and find what the quadratic is on the left hand side. So what we're going to do is we're going to work backwards. So here, if we know the answers are x equals negative 8 and x equals negative 2, that means the brackets would have had to be, in terms of the first bracket, it would have to be x plus 8, because to make that bracket 0, we know x is going to have to be equal to negative 8. So if we know x is negative 8, it's then going to be x plus 8. That would be the bracket there. And if the other solution is x equals negative 2, that means the bracket would have had to be x plus 2, because to make that bracket 0, we'd have to have there negative 2. Now, in terms of this question, then it would have to then equal 0. And then if we expand our brackets, we'll find what goes on the left-hand side. So let's expand our brackets. X times x is x squared. X times 2 will be plus 2x. And then we've got 8 times x will be plus 8x. And then finally, 8 times 2, well, 8 times 2 is 16, so plus 16. And that equals 0. Now here we're just going to simplify this left-hand side here. So I'm actually going back upwards here as I'm solving this question. So I'm going to have then x squared. 2x plus 8x is 10x, so plus 10x, and then plus 16. And then that equals 0. And that's it. So that's what the quadratic would be on the left-hand side. Now the question said to find the values of b and c. So b is the coefficient of x, the number in front of the x, so that's 10, so b is 10. And c is the constant on the end, so that'd be 16, so 16. And that's it, that's our answer. b is equal to 10, and c is equal to 16. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 17. Okay, question number 17. So question number 17 is a similar question where we've got the quadratic as x squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And it's got one solution of x equals negative 3. In other words, that's a repeated root. It's the same solution twice. We've been asked to find the values of b and c. So we've got this quadratic we want to find, but we know this solution is x equals negative 3. So if x equals negative 3, because it's a quadratic, we know there's going to have to be two brackets. So that means it's what we call a repeated root. So it's going to be the same bracket twice. And in terms of that bracket, if the answer is minus 3, it must be then x plus 3, because it must be then negative 3 plus 3 is equal to 0. And because it's a repeated root, it's going to be the same bracket twice. So that means the two brackets will be x plus 3 and x plus 3. And if you had x plus 3 bracket x plus 3 equals 0, the answer would be x equals negative 3. That's it. Okay, now in terms of this, let's expand our brackets. X times x is x squared. X times 3 would be plus 3x. 3 times x is plus 3x. And then finally, 3 times 3 is 9, so plus 9. And then that equals 0. And if we simplify this, the 3x plus 3x would be 6x. So that's going to give us x squared plus 6x plus 9, and that equals 0. And that's it. So that's the quadratic. Now we wanted to find the values of b, so that's the coefficient of x, which is 6. And we wanted to find c, the constant on the end, so that's 9. And that's it. So b equals 6 and c equals 9. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 18. Okay, so question number 18, we've been asked to solve y squared minus 6y equals 27. Now this question is a bit different than the ones we've looked at so far, because all the other questions we've had so far have had an equals 0, but this time we've got equals 27. Now if we want to solve a quadratic using factorization, we need it to equal 0, so we want one of the sides to equal 0. Now in terms of this, I would want to make the right hand side equal 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 27 off the left hand side and 27 away from the right hand side. In terms of the left hand side, then we'd have our y squared, our minus 6y, and then we'd have our minus 27 on the end there. because we're just taking 27 away from this. And then on the right hand side we'd have 27, take away 27, so that'll be equal to 0. So that's fantastic. We've now got the quadratic equaling 0. Now we've got the quadratic equaling 0, we can then factorise the left hand side and get our solutions. So let's factorise. So bracket, 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 bracket equals 0. Because it's y squared, we're going to put y's at the front of both brackets. And we want to find two numbers that will multiply together to give us negative 27, and we'll add together to give us negative 6. Now because they're timesing together to give us a negative, one's going to be positive and one's going to be negative. And we want them to times together to be minus 27. And then when we add them together, we're going to get minus 6. So I'm thinking 3 and negative 9, because 3 times negative 9 is minus 27, and negative 9 plus 3 is equal to negative 6. So that means our brackets would be y plus 3 and y minus 9. And in terms of these brackets, we want to see when they're equal to 0. So this bracket will be whenever y is equal to minus 3, and here, or y is equal to 9. And that's it. So there are solutions. Y equals minus 3 or y equals 9. So if you've got an equation which has a quadratic in it, but it doesn't equal 0, make it 0 to begin with, and then try and factorise it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 19. Okay, so question number 19, we've been asked to solve w squared plus 2w equals 8. So again, this doesn't equal 0. So let's take away 8 from both sides of the equation. In terms of the left-hand side, we're going to have w squared plus 2w and then minus 8. And the right-hand side of the equation, we've got 0 because we're taking away 8 to get rid of the 8. So then that will equal 0. Now let's factorise the left-hand side here. So bracket, 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 bracket equals 0. And we're going to put w's at the front of both brackets like so. Now we want to find two numbers that will times together to give us minus 8 and we'll add together to be 2. So I'm thinking 4 minus 2, because minus 2 and 4. Because minus 2 times 4 is minus 8, and minus 2 plus 4 is equal to 2. So that's fantastic. And then in terms of our brackets, this bracket, well, w will equal 2, because 2 take away 2 is equal to 0. Or in terms of this bracket, w will equal negative 4. And that's it. So w equals 2 or w equals minus 4. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 20. So question number 20, we've been asked to solve x squared equals 8x minus 15. So again, this doesn't equal 0. Now here we've got the x squared being positive on the left-hand side, so I'm going to want to keep it on that side. If there was a minus x squared, I'd probably want to add x squared to both sides, but in this case, we do have that x squared being positive. So whenever I have that quadratic on one side and the 0 on the other, I tend to want to have my x squared being positive. So I'm going to keep the x squared on this side, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of what's on the right-hand side. So I'm going to take away 8x from both sides to begin with. So on the left-hand side, we had x squared, and we're taking away 8x, so it's going to be x squared minus 8x. And on the right-hand side, we had 8x minus 15. We're taking away the 8x, so we're going to be left with minus 15. Okay, that's great. Now we want it to equal 0 on the right-hand side, so we're now going to add 15 to both sides. So on the left-hand side, we're going to have x squared minus 8x plus 15. On the right-hand side, we're going to get that's equal to 0. So that's fantastic. Now we just need to factorise the left-hand side. So let's go back up here. We've got x squared minus 8x plus 15 equals 0. So we're going to factorise the left-hand side. So bracket, 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 bracket equals 0. And we're going to put x's at the front of both brackets because it's x squared. X times x is x squared. Now we want to find two numbers that will multiply together to give us 15 and will add together to give us negative 8. Now because they're timesing together to give us a positive and they're adding together to give us a negative, they're both going to be negative. Now I'm thinking minus 3 and minus 5, because minus 3 times minus 5 is 15, and minus 3 plus minus 5 will bring us down to minus 8. So it's going to be x minus 3 and x minus 5. And then, in terms of this, we just need to find when each bracket will be equal to 0. So this bracket will be whenever x equals 3, or in this case, it'll be whenever x equals 5. And that's it. So that's our solutions. X equals 3 or x equals 5. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 21. Okay, question number 21, we've been asked to solve x squared plus 70 equals 17x. So again, this doesn't equal 0 on the right-hand side. We want it to be all on one side and then equal 0 on the other side. Because the x squared here is positive on the left-hand side, I'm going to want to keep it on that side. But so that means I want to get rid of the 17x on the right-hand side. So I want it to equal 0 on this side. So I'm going to take 17x's off both sides. So it's minus 17x and minus 17x. Now in terms of this left-hand side, I could write, if I wanted to, x squared plus 70 and then the minus 17x on the end. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the x squared to begin with. I'm then going to write the minus 17x because that's what I'm used to whenever I'm looking at quadratics. I'm used to seeing the x squared term, the x's, and then the numbers on the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that minus 17x just after the x squared, and then I'm going to write the plus 70 on the end, just sort of rearranging the order slightly. So rather than writing x squared plus 70 and then minus 17x, I'm just putting the minus 17x there and then the plus 70 on the end. And then on the right hand side we have 17x, we're taking away 17x, that's then going to equal 0. So that's fantastic, we've now got a quadratic equaling 0, so let's try and factorize, so bracket, 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 bracket equals 0. And because it's x squared, let's go for x, and we want to find two numbers that will times together to give us 70, and we'll add together to give us negative 17. So I'm thinking minus 7 and minus 10, because minus 7 times minus 10 is 70, it's a positive, and minus 7 plus minus 10 will be minus 17. So that means our two brackets will be, well, our solutions will be whenever x is equal to 7 or whenever x is equal to 10. And that's it, there are solutions, x equals 7 or x equals 10. And you can check it out, and with any of these questions that we've done so far, you can check out your answers. If, for instance, x is equal to 10, 10 squared is equal to 100, plus 70 is 170, and on the right-hand side, 17 times 10 is 170, and 170 equals 170. And likewise, if x is equal to 7, 7 squared is 49, plus 70, that's going to be 119, and 17 times 7 is 119 as well, so that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 22. Okay, question number 22, we've been asked to solve y squared plus 9y plus 2 equals 8y plus 58. So this time again, we don't have it equaling 0, we want it to equal 0. The y squared is positive on this side, so what I want to do is I want to make the right hand side equal 0. So I'm going to take away 8y from both sides to begin with, so take away 8y and take away 8y to get rid of that 8y there. So on the left hand side we had y squared. 9y's take away 8y's will be 1y, but I'm just going to write plus y, I'm not going to write plus 1y, I'm going to write plus y. And then we've got our plus 2. And then on our right hand side we're taking away 8y, so we're going to then be left with 58. Okay, we want it to equal 0 here on the right hand side, so now let's take away 58 from both sides. So take away 58 and take away 58. On the left hand side we're going to have y squared plus y, and then we've got 2 take away 58, and 2 take away 58 will be minus 56, and then that will equal 0. So that's fantastic, we've now got a quadratic equaling 0. So let's factorize it, so let's put our brackets down, equaling 0. Because it's y squared, let's put y's at the front of both brackets. And now we want to find two numbers that will times together to give us negative 56, and we'll add together to give us the 1, because remember it's plus 1y, so we want them to add together to be 1. So in terms of two numbers that times together to be minus 56 and add together to be 1, I'm thinking negative 7 and 8, because negative 7 times 8 will be minus 56, and negative 7 plus 8 is equal to 1. So it's going to be y minus 7 and y plus 8. And then when is each bracket equal to 0? Well, here, whenever y is equal to 7, or in terms of this one, whenever y is equal to minus 8. And that's it, there are two solutions, whenever y is equal to 7, or whenever y is equal to minus 8. And that's it. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 23. Okay, question number 23. Question number 23 says, Victor is y years old, and his brother Fred is 4 years older than Victor. So if Victor is y years old, Fred is 4 years older, so that'll be y plus 4. That's going to be Fred's age, y plus 4, whatever Victor is, plus 4. And the product of their ages is 780. So 780, that's the product. Remember in maths, the word product means to multiply two things together. So when we multiply their ages together, we get 780. So in other words, y times y plus 4 is equal to 780. So let's write that down. Y bracket y plus 4 equals 780. And that's it. Well, this is our equation, the product of their ages. So y is Victor's age and y plus 4 is Fred's age. And when we times them together, we get 780. So let's write that down. Y bracket y plus 4 is equal to 780. And that's it. That's our equation. And then if we go down to part B says solve the equation from A. So solve this equation to find Victor's age. We want to find Victor's age, which was, we just go back up again, Victor's age was y. So we want to find y. So let's solve this equation. So I'm just going to write it out again. Y bracket y plus 4, close brackets, equals 780. So we want to solve that equation. So let's expand our brackets. Y times y is y squared. And y times 4 will be plus 4y. Okay, and that's going to equal 780. So that's great. It's almost like the equations we've been solving so far, except we want it to equal 0 on the right hand side. So let's take away 780 from both sides. On the left hand side then we'd have y squared plus 4y, and then we're taking away 780. And on the right hand side we're going to be left with 0. And now we just need to factorize this. So if we factorize it, let's put our brackets down. I'm just going to go beneath it actually. So let's factorize it. So brackets down, bracket, 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 bracket equals 0. And we've got y's at the front of both brackets. And we want to find two numbers that times together to give us negative 780. And we'll add to be 4. Now in terms of this question, it is a calculator question, so that's quite nice. You can then try and see different numbers that are factors of 780. For instance, it looks like it's a multiple of 20. So I'll probably start off by dividing it by 20 and see what that is. So 780 divided by 20 20 is 39. But then if we had minus 39 and 20, when we add them together, it's going to be something that's not 4. And likewise, if we chose the other way around, it's not going to be 4 either. Okay, so let's try maybe 40. 780 divided by 40 is equal to, that's a decimal number, so that's not going to work. We've tried 20, we've tried 40, let's try 30. 780 divided by 30, is 30 a factor of 780? It is, and it's 26, that's interesting, so let's go back up here. 30 and negative 26, because 30 times negative 26 is minus 780, and negative 26 plus 30 is equal to 4, so that's it, we've found them. Y plus 30 and y minus 26. So that means in terms of our brackets, when do they equal 0? So here it'll be whenever y is equal to minus 30, or here it'll be whenever y is equal to 26. Now in terms of this question, it's to do with Victor's age. So Victor's age, it can't be minus 30, so that can't be a solution. So that means Victor will have to be 26 years old. So Victor is 26. Now the question asks us for Victor's age. If it did ask us for Fred's age, we would then add 4. So Fred must be equal to 30 years old. But this question just asks us Victor's age, so that's going to be 26. Okay, let's look at our next question, question number 24. Okay, so question number 24. Question number 24 says a rectangular field is 30 meters longer than wide. So I'm actually just going to do a little sketch here, okay? So here's a little sketch of our field. So there's our rectangular field. And what we know is it's 30 meters longer than it is wide. And we know its area is 8,800 meters squared, or 8,800 square meters. I've been asked to work out the perimeter of the field. Okay, so let's form an equation. So I'm going to call its width x meters. So that's going to be x meters in terms of how wide it is. And its length is 30 meters longer. So that's going to be x plus 30 because it's 30 meters longer. So that's our expressions for the width of the rectangle and the length of the rectangle. Now we could, if we wanted to, call the length of it x and the width of it x minus 30, and that's fine, but just whenever you solve it, you're going to find x being the length rather than the width. We're going to, whenever we solve this equation, we're going to find out x, which is the width of it, and then we then might need to then add 30 to find the length. So that's fine in terms of which way you set it up. It just means that you might find x being either the length rather than the width. Okay, so we've got expressions for the width of the rectangle, which is x, and the length, which is x plus 30, because it's 30 meters longer than it is wide. And we know its area is 8,800 meters squared, so 8,800 meters squared, or square meters. Now in terms of the area of a rectangle, we find that by doing the length multiplied by the width. So if we multiply the length by the width, we get the area. So that means that x multiplied by x plus 30, I remember as we just put them beside each other when we're multiplying them, like so. So x times x plus 30 would be x bracket x plus 30 when we multiply them. We're going to get an answer of 8,800. So that's fantastic. We've now found an equation. Now let's solve it and find out what x is. And if we can find out what x is, we can find the width, we can then find the length, and then we can find the perimeter of the field. Okay, so let's expand our brackets. X times x is x squared, and x times 30 would be plus 30x, and that equals 8,800. Now we're going to take 8,800 away from both sides of the equation. So we're going to get x squared plus 30x minus 8,800 equals 0. Just taking 8,800 away from both sides of the equation, so it equals 0. And now what we're going to do is we're going to factorize. So bracket, 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 bracket equals 0. And we're going to put x's at the front of both brackets, and we want to find two numbers that times together to give us minus 8,800. And when we add them together, we get 30. Okay, so let's try and find some numbers that will times together to be minus 8,800. And it is a calculator question, so that's quite nice. Okay, so I'm going to get my calculator, and I'm going to first of all consider, well, it ends in 2 zeros, so let's divide it by 100. So that would be minus 188. They would times together to be minus 8,800. But when we add them together, well, it's going to be a negative. So let's turn it around and do minus 88 and 100. And when we add them together, we get that's equal to 12, not 30. So that's not going to work. Okay, so we've tried 100. Now let's try perhaps 50. So let's take our 8,800 and divide it by 50. We get that's equal to 176. So let's try minus 50 and 176. But when we add them together, it's not going to be 30. So we've tried dividing this by 100. We've tried dividing it by 50. Now let's try 75. So let's take 8,800 and divide it by 75. And that's a decimal number. Okay, let's try 80 perhaps. So let's do 8,800 divided by 80, and that's equal to 110. That's fantastic. We have minus 80 and 110. Minus 80 times 110 would be minus 8,800, and when we do minus 80 plus 110, that's equal to 30. So that's it. So in the brackets would be minus 80 and plus 110. Okay, so that's fantastic. We've worked out our brackets. So that means that either here x is equal to 80, or here x would be equal to minus 110. Now x is the width of a field, so it means it can't be a negative value, so it's going to have to be 80. So it means that x is equal to 80. So I'm just going to write that in blue here. So x is equal to 80 meters. That's the width of the field. Now in terms of that side, that's going to be 80 meters as well, because remember we've been asked to find the perimeter. So that's 80 meters as well. The length of it, well, if we add 30 to x, that's going to be 110 meters, and that means that this length is 110 meters as well. So if we add them all up, that'll be the perimeter of the field. So let's do 80 plus 110 plus 80 plus 110, and that'll give us the perimeter of the field. And when we do that, we get an answer of 380 meters, and that's it. That's the perimeter of the field. And that's it. So these have been the video solutions to the Corbettmaths practice questions on solving quadratics by using factorisation for GCSE Foundation Maths. If you need any extra help in this topic, I highly recommend you go to Corbettmaths and you watch video numbers 266 and 267E, and those two video tutorials will be really useful for you. Also, it might be useful to go back to Corbettmaths and watch the videos on factorising quadratics and the difference between two squares. They'll be really useful for you as well. So this video has gone through the video solutions to the practice questions. I really hope you found it useful. If you have found it useful, please like it and please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you. Cheers. Bye.